Hey everyone, Sycra here, and today I'm going to be doing a critique of one of the forum members over at the Sycra.net forums. Okay, so what we have here is, I'm not sure what she is, but she's in a cloak and she has a big sword, and I think the idea is pretty cool. I really think you did a good job on the smoke, and I don't know how to do better smoke than that. And the drawing is nice. I like the character's expression. I think you captured that very well. And what you had mentioned is that you were going for intensity of color and how to achieve, I'm not sure exactly what your words were, but like vibrant colors or intense colors. And I think specifically you were going for a red that was fairly intense. So I'm going to cover how I think is best to go about doing that. Okay, so I'm assuming you wanted the red to stand out and you're having a bit of trouble with making the red stand out. And I think the reason is that you have the red against a white background. And so thinking about the background color is really important. So, okay, before you start the image, even before you put down the color, think about what color you want to make intense and vibrant. So in this case, red. Okay, so you want red to be the color that is dominant and vibrant. So then think about the complementary color, which is green. So you would use green to make the red stand out. You don't want white. Like, white is pretty much the worst for making colors look vibrant, especially when you're rendering. The solution when you do use white is to go towards very saturated colors, and it tends to work better if you're working in the pastel range. So if you've seen anime or manga type illustrations where the colors are very pastel-like, you know, almost like a watercolor, that's why, because you're against this white, and the white is giving you not much room to play with colors in terms of their richness, and so you take another route. But in this case, okay, get rid of the white. And I said green, but when I say green, I don't mean like pure green or green as you would assume. I mean almost like anything that has some green in it, I would think of as a green. So in this case, it would be a green gray or a green brown, probably closer to a gray, but just having that base of green is really important. Next thing that's important is, because the green isn't white, we can play with values a bit. So I started out by setting a green gray color, and I put it to multiply. So that's going to make it so we're not dealing with white, which is the highest value, and instead we're dealing with something closer to a middle value. So then I can go lighter or I can go darker than that. So I think that's the first thing you have to keep in mind. The next thing in creating colorful images is to have a lot of variety of color, and you can get away with a lot in the shadows. Now, because you used red, it's a bit more difficult to add a lot of variation in the shadows, just because red is naturally a darker, the color red has a darker value. If you go too much lighter, it will turn into pink, so it's not red anymore. So just sticking to red, when you go into the shadows are already going to be pretty dark, and so you don't have a lot of room to put in a lot of color. So I tried my best to put in some variation, and I put more into the highlights and more into things like the sword. I think you can play around with more variation in those areas, and the smoke. You can always put variation, and the way I do it is I pick the color or the value of the color as it is. So let's say with the sword, it's a gray, but maybe it's a little close to green. So, okay, it's going a little close to green. Then I don't change the value, or I very slightly change the value, And I just go around the color wheel and put a bit of purple, a bit of blue, a bit of yellow, a bit of green. But these are all very desaturated, so I haven't played with the saturation. And that's just adding hints of more going on, and your eye picks this up. Now, you can do a more exaggerated version of that. It just takes a bit more skill, and probably a bit more skill than I currently have because I don't paint a lot, but that's kind of when I do paint, I try and put in as much variation as possible. So really, I think it's just those two main things you have to consider is, okay, you want a color to sing, you want it to be vibrant. Well, what is its complement? And then make that actually what most things are. So most things all have green in this image, even the skin, because I put that layer on multiply, it's going to affect everything. So everything gets dulled down. And so the trick isn't to add more. It's not like create more saturation, more red. It's actually to have less things competing, less intense color, and then focus where you want your bright color. So in here, the only pure red, and I see you didn't really go all the way to pure red as well, but in mine I did go to pure red, and I only have it in the hood thing. So, and it's also the part closest to the face, and that's so that it's a focal point. Now, what I've done is I decided to take some liberties and just play with the design a little bit. I noticed you had two versions, and one was the older version, and then there's a newer version where you corrected things, and there's some red in front of the sword, and I wasn't exactly sure what was going on. I think I might have gotten your idea wrong in my head, but I thought, okay, let me just play with this, and what would it be like if this is fire coming out of this sword? And so I'm sorry if this is, really going astray from what you intended. But the bigger concern for me was just, okay, let's say I took it further. What would I do? Because there are a lot of things you can do when you start an image or when you design an image to improve things. But in the end, I think what would benefit you is, well, your drawing. I would probably focus on your drawing, but then when you eventually do get into color, really consider starting on a neutral color, be it, or a neutral value, and not white, because white is, you will be fighting it your whole way through. So even if you had started on a color that wasn't the complement, so not a green gray, but like even an orange gray, the red would sing a lot more. So that's my take on it, and I hoped it helped, and thanks for watching.